Overwatch, the online multiplayer game that defied the odds and created a simple but mechanically fun team shooter that also became a multi-million-dollar franchise, having sold over 12 million copies across the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Battle.net PC platforms, despite being a completely unrealized and brand new intellectual property. Rated T for teen in the United States and similarly rated in other regions abroad, this was also a super popular shooter that could be ethically enjoyed by younger players. Seriously, how many youngins do you encounter in a typical Call of Duty game? Too many, my friends. Far too many! Overwatch became an industry phenomenon very quickly, appealing to gamers and artists, kids and adults. Its level of appeal is pretty undeniable. Riding on the coattails of its distinctive cast of characters and their overarching story, we were given the likes of the dark, edgy Reaper with his sullen, gravelly voice and grim and ghostly demeanor.
I'll be sure to send them your regards, monkey.
As well as the cute and bubbly Tracer with her pixie-like personality and petite body type, with a multitude of other distinctive characters ranging from young and old, men and women. Overwatch is rife with visual appeal for core and casual audiences, so much so that it is no wonder that Blizzard initiated merchandise deals out the wazoo. You simply can't go anywhere without finding merch for this game, especially in a local game store. Shirts, mugs, books, toys, more toys, frickin' Monopoly! So it's safe to say that if you enjoy this game, you probably have a favorite hero with a part to play within the game's overarching plot. Let's talk about that. Overwatch's universe and narrative are set in a somewhat futuristic time on Earth, possibly set in the year, or very close to the year, 2075, which is concurrent with the Overwatch short Recall. In this short, Winston reflects on his childhood and is ambushed by a squad of soldiers from the terrorist organization Talon, as led by Reaper. Winston is ultimately victorious and retaliates by recalling Overwatch agents to active duty, despite the earlier warnings of Athena, the onboard AI that also serves as the announcer for the game.
Traveling to Iconville. Now, no need for that, Winston. Your heart rate is through the roof.
Contextually, this short is a pretty decent interpretation of the characters in the game universe, adequately showing off their personalities, abilities, and opposing ideologies, while putting on some action-y flair for an entertaining animated spectacle.
Extraction at 32%.
Recall is the earliest point in the portion of the timeline actively present in the game, and the shorts as far as we know. And this short is essentially where the immediate story begins. This, however, was not the very first animated Overwatch media, as the original cinematic trailer that introduces the game's entire concept by pitting Winston and Tracer up against Reaper and Widowmaker obviously was publicly posted first, though the events in this trailer actually happened a few months after Recall. Recall launched in March of 2016, and much like the animated output of the Team Fortress 2 Meet the Team videos, there would be a very short gap between initial follow-up releases, but those gaps would eventually grow larger and larger as time went on. There would be a steady stream of monthly shorts until the release of Hero in May 2016, where Soldier 76 brutally takes on the Los Muertos gang and saves and inspires a young girl. From here, there would be a 3-month gap between this short and the follow-up, The Last Bastion, in August 2016. The Last Bastion would prove to be a completely different endeavor for the storytellers at Blizzard. Unlike previous entries, this short contains no dialogue and tells its story through music and movement, much like the opening half of Disney Pixar's WALL-E. Finally, this season, as it were, is ended, or perhaps Season 2 is begun, with Infiltration, which was released in November 2016. This was the first fully animated short to also aid in the introduction of a new hero for the game, Sombra. From here, animation releases would become a lot more sparse, as Rise and Shine would not premiere for almost a year at Gamescom 2017 in the month of August. Alright, let's address these release gaps for a second. Part 1. Quantitative content. With the end of the consistent stream of video content, Overwatch's sense of lore and world-building starts to become increasingly vague and nebulous. Occasionally, the team introduces a new character conversation here or there in the game itself through updates to help give the characters a little more life.
Staying out of trouble, Genji?
On my best behavior, Captain.
But otherwise, the audience, which was feeding on little nuggets here or there through the shorts, origin videos, etc., is basically starved of story content after this, with Jeff Kaplan and his team at Blizzard primarily focusing on the Overwatch events and generating more content to entice the microtransactions machine. Frickin' Microtransactions, I swear, nowadays you just can't get away from them. It also goes without saying that, save for the intro of the game, which is a little more than Winston awkwardly fumbling about in front of a webcam, though with charm, is the only story content within the game itself that consists of these beautifully rendered and animated trailers. It's worth noting, by the way, that this intro takes place right after Recall. The lack of story content within Overwatch has always been a bit of a strange oddity to me. Truthfully, not even Team Fortress 2 contained its own story content as far as I remember, with all of it relegated to webcomics and YouTube videos. But then Super Smash Bros. Brawl and its sequels, as well as a number of other games, like most versions of Resident Evil 4, all let you view trailers and cutscenes within their menus. With the Overwatch shorts not present in the game, it creates a bit of a disconnect between the gameplay and its narrative. Not that you need me to tell you this, but it certainly doesn't help that the game doesn't have any actual campaign, with even a shred of narrative for the player to explore. Now, don't get me wrong, this can indeed be drummed up to impatience on my part. Many players of Overwatch probably don't actually care for the story all that deeply, which is perfectly fine. But bear in mind, this world inspired many of us, and some of us have grown very invested in the series. It's not unlike enjoying a character who ends up dying in a given story. Take Game of Thrones, for example. Just because the Red Wedding happened doesn't mean we weren't invested in the characters who were killed or the characters left alive in the aftermath. Overwatch's characters have proven to be quite enjoyable, and I'm sure many of us, myself especially, want to see more of them. So strap in, kiddos, we got a long rant ahead of us. Let's consider my earlier reference of the Overwatch seasonal events for a moment. If we look at the timeline of each one, we have the Summer Games, Halloween Terror, Winter Wonderland, the Anniversary Event, and the Archives. Of these 5, only one, that being the Archives, has provided any canon story content to Overwatch, of which has been mostly high quality. Archives 2017 gave us Uprising, a playable rendition of Tracer's first mission within Overwatch, a seek and destroy mission to be exact, during the Omnic Crisis about 7 years prior to the start of the game. This also came with a sort of comics in motion cutscene for both the intro and the outro of the mode, with Tracer herself narrating the story in the past tense, giving us the sense that this was definitely taking place some time ago.
Morrison has sent our strike team to liberate the city. It's my first mission, and the only way to save my home.
Admittedly, for the first time, this was actually pretty cool, finally getting to see a side of the characters in the game that is also present in the shorts. It's awesome. Us players finally get to see Tracer interact with her companions, Torbjorn, Reinhardt, and Mercy in the field, while also interacting with Captain Amari, Commander Morrison, and Commander Reyes over the radio, who we later refer to, by the way, as Ana, Soldier 76, and Reaper. And it's not some completely disconnected YouTube video. This is in the game, guys. This is actual story content within the game. We can finally get back on track here. And it's over in like 15 minutes. Don't get me wrong. I found Uprising to be pretty fun and refreshing for what it was at the time, especially as someone who is getting pretty weary of the same versus game types and non-canon co-op modes like Junkenstein's Revenge over and over. In Uprising, though, you don't have to worry about an opposing team. You don't have to worry about having those lightning-fast reflexes. The PvE mode of Overwatch I had been craving had finally been realized. Sort of. The problem is the mode is pretty dang short and ends a little too quickly, being beatable in around 15 minutes depending on the difficulty you choose. Additionally, it doesn't really provide enough story content to feel quite as rewarding as any of the shorts, which is already usually not a whole lot of ground to cover to begin with. This was also the first and, at the time, only story content in the game, which can be played for a few weeks, and then it's gone for a year. And it won't even be the highlight of Archive in the following year. It won't be expanded upon, but rather replaced in a way, with another mode in the form of the incredibly badass Retribution mode, and the somewhat Storm Rising a year after that. Speaking of which, let's talk about Retribution for a moment. The follow-up to Uprising was a very different affair. For starters, it too takes place prior to Recall. In fact, it takes place years into the past when both Overwatch and Blackwatch are active. The mode is another cooperative 4-player mode, much like Uprising, but the big difference is that instead of fighting Omnics, you're now fighting nondescript soldiers of different types who are hunting you down after Commander Reyes rather viciously murders an unarmed mob boss. Given that this mode is mostly about reaching and defending an extraction point, and unlike Uprising, doesn't use a payload, its overall flow is much better and is a definite improvement on the previous year's Archive mode. Unfortunately, it too is on the short side, but this time it has a fully animated cutscene to start things off. This cutscene is done within the game's engine, and comes almost to the same level of visual quality as any of the given shorts, while showing us a side of Reaper we had not yet really seen, as well as giving us some more Moira, whom we had not seen animated at all until this point. The mode ends off with a comics in motion outro, with McCree speculating if this was the beginning of the end of Overwatch. I loved Retribution. Granted, I'm biased here, considering Moira is my main healer, and any content with her is a very welcome treat in my book, but I very much enjoyed its overall flow while delivering some new and exciting story content in a way that the game had never really delivered before. Storm Rising was more or less the same, but set on a different map, didn't have the same kind of flow, and the gameplay was less interesting. However, it contained fully animated cutscenes for the intro and the outro of the mode, even introducing a new villainous Omnic character who is opting to work with the sinister Doomfist. In spite of the lame gameplay, the story beats were rewarding enough. This mode seems to take place after Recall, with Tracer, Genji, and Winston now being aided by Mercy, hunting down another Omnic mob boss for information. Even in spite of my feelings on the mode's gameplay, I enjoyed this, just for its intro and outro. I just wish it could have lasted longer. What I'm trying to say here is there isn't very much here, when there really ought to be. Overwatch wants us to really believe and put stock into these characters, which is fine and all. Hell, Team Fortress 2 formatted itself the same way. But Team Fortress 2 was such a dumb and wacky game that it's easy to not really put a lot of energy into its story and overall world. It's a bunch of guys brutally whacking each other at the behest of the announcer because two brothers got into some nutty power struggle. At least that's how I understand it. A lot of that stuff is actually conveyed in webcomics. Overwatch's character interactions are presented much in the same way, as well as with comics in motion type origin shorts that give some more context in a shorter period of time. But Overwatch's world invites a lot more energy and personal investment, as well as a better understanding of the characters, their emotions, and their struggles. It's because Overwatch's characters are so distinctive and so interesting, we want to know their origins, as well as their likes, their dislikes, their motivations, etc. And how it all intertwines, of course. And just hearing a 2-second conversation prior to a 6v6 match,
You wouldn't believe what I learned about you, Sparrow.
I am at peace with who I was. Your threat does not concern me.
is not really enough when there are now seemingly annual gaps between the media story content. Again, call me impatient, because I admit that's exactly what I am, but we're now wrapping up year 3 of the game, and the overarching plot quite honestly hasn't moved very far past Recall. We're years down the line, and we've barely gotten past the introduction, let alone the first act. And with the sluggish pace of the story releases not showing any signs of speeding up, I can't help but wonder if we will get any really substantial story content before Blizzard chooses to put Overwatch to bed and sequelize it. Yeah, I know, probably not, but I mean, the point of the internet is to complain about stuff, right? So here we are.
Why you gotta be that guy? Why you gotta be that?
Part 2. Writing through gameplay. As I stated, Overwatch takes place on Earth in the future and addresses a multitude of different themes in addition to its character interactions. Themes such as prejudice, war, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the meaning of honor. Much of it is told through subtext that you can only find through the internet, the Collector's Edition art book, and little hints within the character dialogue. For example, are any of you aware that Symmetra is apparently a bad guy, or at least works for some bad guys? She's employed at a company called Vishkar Corporation, a company that indulges self-sustaining cities through architecture generated from light mass tech. This is exemplified in her gameplay, as she can generate portable turrets, shields, and teleporters out of nothing but light. A neat feature that plays into her backstory as a genius who can create technology, further showcased in this conversation between her and Torbjorn.
I am impressed. I would not think such crude creations actually function.
Why, thank you. I must admit I'm surprised. Hey!
But what I think is more compelling is her connection to the DJ of Rio de Janeiro, Lucio. Vishkar attempted to put his people through internment, enforcing curfews and other such oppressive behaviors in an effort to develop their land. In response, Lucio became a powerhouse name by stealing Vishkar's tech and retooling it into his healing audio tech in an effort to rally his people to freedom. This is a really cool story idea with what I think are pretty interesting anti-corporate themes that could and should be explored further. Which would be fine and dandy and all, but, literally none of this is in the game. This concept is really interesting to me, but it quite literally doesn't exist in the game outside of a couple lines of easily missed dialogue that doesn't even try to contextualize the situation. None of it is here, and so far we don't even have a short to bridge this gap. Also, justice reigns from above. Farah works at Vishkar. To get back to the shorts for a moment, locations from these shorts have actually become playable maps within the game. Yeah, you know, it's cool if you let us play in Junkertown or on the Horizon Lunar Colony because, oh, hey, look, it's that one place from that one short. That's cool, that's awesome. And then you realize, oh, wait, in the actual game, there's basically nothing compelling about this in context. Like, why should I care about the Moon Colony? Why should I care about Winston's backstory in any respect outside of what was shown to us in Recall? Why should we invest in the uprising that led to the deaths of the scientists there? It doesn't really affect the other shorts in any notable way, and it most certainly doesn't affect the game. We don't get to see any of these other super smart animals who are on the colony. It's incredibly frustrating because I want to care about Winston's backstory. I want to know more about him and put his past into context in a compelling way. Why can't we see, or better yet, play scenarios for Junkrat and Roadhog, or Reaper, Widowmaker, and Sombra? I understand that Blizzard wanted a minimalist approach to their narrative and world building in Overwatch, but when it comes to the company that also gave us the wide lores of Warcraft and Starcraft, with actual in-game stories, with actual in-game cinematics that convey actual narratives, with beginnings, middles, and ends, it just gets disappointing. It makes me just not want to play the game. It makes me not enjoy these characters as much because, despite my interest in them, it feels like I'm never gonna get to learn who these guys are. And you know, normally I'm not even all that fond of where the industry is going in terms of making games more cinematic. Yeah, forced walking, that's always a real frickin' treat. But considering Overwatch already has a solid foundation for its gameplay just through its multiplayer, you have to wonder why not even an attempt has been made to create something outside of competitive play and the league to keep players invested in the long term. A new hero once in a while is interesting, even if it does little outside of throwing more wrenches in the game's sense of balance or lack thereof. Yeah, McCree really needed that stupid fire rate buff. Yeah, thanks a lot for that. But what else is there? With Archive being an annual release and doomed to be taken out of the game as quickly as it's put in, how many hours of quick play or competitive or arcade does Blizzard expect people to sink into this game before any of us get bored of only seeing our favorite characters operate outside of the parameters of their lore? Seriously, the game itself creates the dumbest, most random matchups that simply don't make any sense. Why would Winston work alongside Reaper? Why would Brigitte say hello to Moira? Why would McCree be dancing with Ashe and fighting alongside Bob? It's ludicrously nonsensical. But that's how the game works. You have to break the immersion to allow players to play together as their preferred characters, which is totally understandable. To force that immersion probably means that you would have to put clone characters into the game, and I doubt anybody wants that. And that's completely understandable. But is it really enough? I'm here to say, no, it's not. Not by a long shot. It more or less feels like a piece of meat dangling just out of reach in front of a starving lion. We can't really play as McCree taking on his personal stake against Ashe, and we can't play Winston taking on Reaper as a potential boss fight. This bit here, where Tracer sneaks up on Widow and jacks her gun, can't do that. Or this part here, where D.Va strategically bails out of Mecha and shoots the reactor to prematurely detonate an explosion and save her home, can't do that. This elaborate hoax to get back to the Queen of Junkertown, cause reasons, can't do that either. Hey, Blizzard, now that microtransactions are kind of going the way of the dodo due to sheer unpopularity and more recently some government litigation, how about you focus on some practical content instead? I'll gladly pay 10 to 20 bucks for a single-player campaign with multiple playable heroes as opposed to 5, 10, freaking $50 for your loot boxes. I mean, you all like money, right? I mean, let's get cracking on this initiative, yeah? Or, heck, who says it has to be single-player? Set up 2 or 3 or 4-player squad-based gameplays so that we can play with friends and operate cooperatively based on the heroes we play. For example, you can have a single-player or 2-player campaign focusing primarily on Morrison and Amari in the earliest years of Overwatch and Blackwatch. Widowmaker could be an in-mission ally who eventually is turned into her more modern persona and turns on Overwatch. Or, I don't know, something a professional could design a lot better. I'm certainly not saying it would be an easy endeavor per se, merely that it is doable, especially for a big team like Blizzard. And this could make Overwatch a deeper, more rewarding experience, especially for those of us looking for more story. Overwatch can still be a narrative experience through its gameplay, as well as its YouTube videos. There's so much potential here, it's almost painful. Its universe is practically begging to be expanded upon in a deeper way. Oh, and could you have the decency to maybe put in a theater mode into the game with all the shorts? Like, come on, it's been 3 years. Shouldn't we be able to experience all of the Overwatch content in Overwatch? Older games from previous generations allow it. Why not this one? Surely something can be done to give more of a bone to those of us who are more invested in the lore and its characters. So if we can't necessarily expand the story through the game itself, perhaps there's another way. It's not entirely uncommon for different studios to collaborate on projects these days, and I'd say the Overwatch dev team and writers Michael Chu and Alyssa Wong are more than capable. So let's explore a few options. Part 3. Writing alternative media. So McCree was a founding member of the Deadlock Gang, but was recruited into Blackwatch when he was 17. Seems legit. Hey McCree, how old are you again? Minimalism and world building woes aside, Overwatch is positively overloaded with narrative potential. The shorts are a gateway to much more lucrative possibilities. We've seen it in the form of fan art, fanfiction, and videos, which, for the most part, really capture these characters in a fun way. These superpowered shooters are not impossible to capture through the art and writing of others, and their standing at Blizzard is hardly sacred. That being said, writers cross mediums all the time now. Game writers cross to comics, and cartoon writers cross to movies and back. If Blizzard isn't equipped to provide story content with depth, length, and substance, then perhaps it's time for the franchise to branch out and collaborate a bit more. Allow me to preface by saying I don't speculate on these completely hypothetical ideas out of a misguided belief that Blizzard is incapable of producing more quality shorts. These are highly trained experts who are quite honestly among the best of the best in Western animation, who clearly craft visual spectacles in a way that few other video game studios can accomplish. However, in my mind at least, I feel like there's more that can be done, and these are just a few potential ideas for how I think a development on Overwatch's story animation could play out. I remember seeing last year a random trailer for an Overwatch Netflix series pop up on social media once or twice. Obviously the trailer was complete April Fool's hoo-ha, using clips from the shorts strung together to form more of a short, epic, cinematic music video. But imagine if this was a real trailer. Netflix has a ton of funding, and their interest lies primarily in their original content, and lately they have been producing several quality cartoon series and animated films in an effort to diversify their Netflix Originals library. What if through joint funding, Blizzard and Netflix shared the production costs of Overwatch the series, or Overwatch the movie? Okay, yeah, I'm stretching, and I'm well aware that this is a super optimistic scenario that will pretty likely never happen. But just imagine! Blizzard's cinematic studio could potentially stay in creative control of the look and tone of the series, applying its visual and writing direction to a potentially larger and more efficient animation studio in a hopefully shorter period of time than the cinematics division at Blizzard could on their own. Of course, on the other hand, it's difficult to imagine a full-on series or show having the same level of visual quality as a typical Overwatch short, but a movie? Now that's more viable. Look, I'm obviously no expert, and I certainly don't work at Blizzard, so I'm not going to even try and humor the idea of pretending that I know what their workflow is like on a given animated short. Some studios work best with their own internal synergy, and could potentially produce subpar content if expected to work with someone or someones who don't share in the same morals in a given work culture. So if Blizzard is basically on their own, an outside entity like Netflix could still foot the bill for a full-on series of shorts and potentially provide additional grunt work through their own internal animation division. Think along the same lines as Microsoft Game Studios, but for Netflix animation. At least in this scenario, the creative direction is not necessarily shared so much as further aided by more artists. Bear in mind, this is all still very hypothetical, and as of now, outside the realm of reality. But still, I think it's cool to speculate about. Being able to boot up Netflix and indulge myself by binge-watching a full season of Overwatch, or watching a movie for the second or third time, I'd do it. I think a lot of people would be really into that, especially if they maintain the quality of the shorts. Another alternative would be to totally ditch the CGI approach and go traditional. Wolfsmoke Studio is the talented team behind the Doomfist story trailer, which showcased Doomfist himself going toe-to-toe with Genji, Winston, and Tracer all at once in a very anime-esque glory, with some high-octane and brilliantly drawn action. An Overwatch anime in this style could potentially better serve the purpose of providing a narrative series and further expand the story in an alternative visual medium. Powerhouse Animation Studios, known for their supreme work on the Castlevania Netflix series, would also be a great option for this type of animation. Man, I can't get away from Netflix. I just can't do it. I like them too much. Oh, by the way, if you get a chance, go watch Netflix Castlevania. Yeah, it's a good show. It's a damn good show. There's also the option of traditional and CGI hybrid animation through the likes of Paris-based studio Fortiche, Known primarily for their collaborative work with former Disney animator Juanjo Guarnido on the animated music video for Freak Kitchen's Freak of the Week, and of course their work on the immensely popular Pop Stars video for the League of Legends group KDA. With an IP as massive as Overwatch, it's hard to imagine not being able to get a large-scale and ultra-talented studio such as these on board. And heck, given that Overwatch League currently sees airings on Disney XD, why not work out a deal with Pixar or Walt Disney Animation? Yeah, no way either of these guys are giving up their rights on merchandising, so you can forget that outcome. Curse you, capitalism! Look, I don't ever want to come off as negative, and I certainly hope that I haven't in this video. But Overwatch has a lot of believable and fun characters to which I've grown pretty attached and invested. And it's unfortunate that I can't objectively speak of anything beyond what little has been given to us in the game and in the comics and trailers. The game can be frustrating in its own right at times, and it's leaving me resentful of characters I used to enjoy. Genji and Hanzo are pretty cool in their cinematic trailer, but holy mother of damn if I don't hate their guts in the game. Doomfist especially as well. Yeah, super fast charge with a 4-second cooldown that kills most characters in one shot. Yeah, that's totally fair and best. Screw Mei. She's cute as a button, but screw Mei. And so on. I just feel like Overwatch has become so much more than just a PvP team shooter, you know? It's a multimedia franchise that begs to be explored without this minimalist approach. And I hate to say it, but the part of the franchise that initiated my enjoyment of these characters in the beginning, which, you know, is the game, is leaving me somewhat jaded. With a consistent talent of voice actors constantly coming back to these roles who actively engage with the community, seemingly more so even than Blizzard themselves at this point, it begs the question as to why we aren't seeing more of an effort being put into changing the story formatting in Overwatch's world building. You know, enough with the nuggets, enough with the little teasers, and enough with all the little nothings here or there. Give us something substantial. I don't speak for all fans, of course, but for me, I'm definitely tired of the scraps and breadcrumbs. Bring on the full-course ding-dang meal. Give me the full-on burger and T-bone steak. Feed my hungry ass, because damn it all, I love Overwatch. And I want to see these characters in a more coherent and deeper medium that doesn't involve controllers. Not in a short or a comic, but in a full-on film or a show that will really expand their stories, give us character development, and let us learn more about them. I know this move doesn't come off quite as common-sensey as, say, my request from last week for Microsoft to greenlight Banjo 3, and I can't speak to how many Overwatch fans would actively want this, but I certainly don't think any fan would say no to more story content either. It's all just another way to further enjoy the world Jeff Kaplan and his team and the rest of Blizzard produced for, well, mostly for money, but also our entertainment. Well guys, entertain us some more. Tell us some newer, deeper stories, and let us be with these characters for longer periods of time, not just playing as them. Whether or not it's going to happen in the end, I'll be waiting either way for that particular content to get made. Till then, I'll see you guys at BlizzCon. But enough about what I think, tell me what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. Did you agree or disagree with what I said? Feel free to leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you liked this video, feel free to give it a like and maybe subscribe to this channel to stay tuned for more stuff. Finally, if you like my art, you can also follow me on the tag @the_Nimanator on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram for plenty more doodles and drawings. Anyway, that's all from me. See you around.